Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our first fireside chat of the year. And looks like we have a great crowd today. Today's topic is creating transformative experiences. My name is Jason Georgiorian, and I'm a partner at LGA Architecture. I'll be your moderator. So, to give you a little bit of background to our fireside chats, it's an ongoing series in a forum where we bring people together to discuss important topics within our natural and built environment. So this chat is no different. Creating places that bring people together for positive experiences is a goal we try to achieve on everything we do. And last year, we ended the last chat of 2020 on a high note by presenting to you the author of The Experience Economy, B. Joseph Pine II. And I'm happy to report, looks like Mr. Pine's on one of our attendees today. We discussed with Mr. Pine how experiences are a prominent and distinct economic offering. People actually prefer experiences over things such as services and goods. And the data suggests here that the institutions that provide the best experiences are the ones that are most likely to sustain themselves and have financial success. Today, we'll hear from top experience designers in their fields. And we're going to learn from them about their approach on how they best design visitor experiences for their clients and their clients' clients. Now, just a little bit of webinar logistics. Everyone is muted today if you're attending. However, we encourage you to ask questions. So there's a Q&A button on your Zoom screen. Please ask a question anytime. We're going to do our best to get those answers for you before we are done. And in addition, we are recording this chat. So if you signed up, you'll be on the lookout for an email from us sometime next week with a link to this recording, as well as a link to our previous fireside chats. And if you're new to these, please take a look at the past ones and let us know what you think. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Craig Galati, and he's going to start with our panelist introductions, and I hope everyone enjoys. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. It's exciting to get three quality designers on the call today to talk about different things, cultural areas, hospitality areas, digital presences. I think we're going to be able to cover the full gambit today, which is really exciting. So I'm going to introduce the panelists really quick. Isaac Marshall is a principal with Aldrich Pears Associates. You may know them as APA. Isaac is a visionary leader who guides teams to create meaningful, engaging experiences. His unique perspective has been honed over the last 3 decades by focusing on interpretive planning and exhibit design for an international cultural sector. He believes our cultural institutions have the ability to be catalysts for positive change in our communities, and he constantly promotes ideas to inspire that transformation. Isaac is a transformational storyteller and experience creator. Next is Vitari Anderson. Vitari is the Chief Experience Officer for the company, the House of V. Vitari is focused on developing solutions rooted in smart, creative, and emerging technologies for the innovative shop, House of V. He's an expert in digital content, activations, and other tech projects in XR, light design, AI, and voice tech. And he can explain all those initials to you later. And he was named one of Ad Age's 40 Under 40 in 2018 for his outstanding work in a real broadcast and virtual reality for the LBCVA. That's the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. Vitari has provided innovative solutions for many clients, including Nike, the NHL, MGM Resorts, Heineken, and blockchain. Vitari is a digital strategist and an experience creator. Greg Chase is the founder and CEO of Experience Strategy Associates, ESA. Greg assists organizations with customer experience and branding strategy. Recently named one of Loyalty 360's top 10 most influential individuals in customer experience and customer loyalty, Greg's an expert when it comes to creating customer and employee strategy. Prior to starting ESA, Greg served as the corporate vice president of guest strategy and insight for MGM Resorts, where he designed, measured, and implemented the guest experience strategy. Greg is an experience strategist and experience creator. So thank you guys, for all three of you, for joining. And boy, there's some credentials if I have ever heard them. It's fantastic. So let me just jump right into the questions. And I also want to, if you guys want to have a little bit of banter back and forth and add to somebody else's question, it's A-okay. And if you have a question you want to ask the other panelist, that'd be great too, because the more that we can learn and the more that we can gain from you guys, the better. That's the reason that we're doing these. So let's start with the first question. And I'll start with Isaac, then we'll go to Vaitari, and then Greg on this first question. So we all know that experiences are unique to each individual, and experiences become very personal because people connect to them inside and emotionally. What are some of the best strategies for experiential design that touches many people? And how, you know, how experiences become mass customized is what I'd like to hear about a little bit. So Isaac, you're up first.
I'm up first. Okay, thanks, Craig. And thanks for hosting this, by the way. This is awesome. You know, I guess I want to start by saying we do interpretive planning and exhibit design for museums and science centers and cultural attractions, parks primarily. And there's always an educational component to that. And what is the difference between education, say, and interpretation? Education is usually about the conveyance of facts, kind of a one-way transfer. Remember these facts. But the best teachers that you had weren't just educators, they were also interpreters because they made those facts relevant to you. And when a fact is relevant to you, you care about it, you internalize it, you do something about it. And so that's why we describe what we do as interpretive planning rather than just education, because we strive to make all those facts and all those experiences relevant to the individual. And there are a number of different strategies that we can employ. And these probably sound similar to some of the other panelists here, but having, you know, hierarchies of information. So you sometimes have to repeat the same message again and again and again, but in different ways. People have to hear it. They might have to interact with it. They might have to read it. There's different ways that they can do that. And when you think about a museum context, in particular, there's kind of broken down into three broad categories you've heard me talk about before, Craig: the streakers, the strollers, and the studiers. And the streakers are the people who just want to run through and see the highlights. They want to, you know, they'll look at a few pictures and they'll read the top level stuff and they'll look at a few objects. But we want to make sure that they get the big picture of what's going on in there, even if they don't have a lot of time. The strollers, they'll go a little deeper. They'll read that heading and they'll say, what is this? And they'll dig in, might read a little bit more about that topic. And if it interests them, they'll continue or they won't. Whereas the studiers are the people that read every single word and every label and find the typos in your labels. And you have to kick them out at the end of the night. And we have to recognize that there are these different visitor types that have different ways that they want to engage with that content. And convey it ways.
I don't know if I'm the one that's frozen or are you frozen?
You there, Craig?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, Isaac froze a bit there.
Isaac froze a bit. Okay. Well, why don't we move right on to Vaitari, and maybe you can answer that same question.
Yeah, I think from an overall digital perspective, good UX and UI are imperative. Also, bringing AI into the user experience can add a lot of value. We just did a social AR experience with a randomizer on TikTok. And that randomizer, it's an algorithm. It's very simple. It's a wheel that stops. But we got billions of engagements based on that experience on TikTok. And so, you know, that little bit of customization there goes a long way. In addition, thinking through AI in the form of like chatbots and automated keyword searches to push proper content to the right individual on the platform. Another perspective is light design and projections and projection mapping. We had the honor to do an amazing project in Europe where we projected all over a city. There was a convention going on there, and we hosted a keynote after where we bussed people over from the convention center to the this space out 5 to 10 minutes outside of the convention center space there. But what was interesting about that is we used projections all around the city that had different messages. And it was, you know, they were regarding the activation or the experience that we were putting on, but how it kind of differed for those folks that we were bussing over is on the highway there and on the path or the route along to where our experience was, those messages were a little different, and they were kind of breadcrumbs adding up to them arriving at the activation space. While riding in the bus, they also had screens that were playing content and also providing breadcrumbs as well. When they landed at the space, we finished with light design with projection mapping onto the building. It was about an 8-minute experience, and we put risers outside. So when people landed at the activation, they can go finish that light design experience from projections and finishing and projection mapping. So again, we were able to generally hit the city and give them a sense of what we were doing, but those that were going to our event had a more focused experience. Using that same idea, thinking through light design and screens for large audiences, Billboard Tech is an amazing tool. Think about Times Square. Driving, individuals get to drive experiences from their phone for many to see, and an opportunity to do that is always keeping people engaged, because they might be the next one to have that opportunity to answer trivia or play a game or just engage with everyone. And then thinking through you can still use that same modality with projections as well, or projection mapping, where people can drive and control an experience. And then for the purpose of this conversation, I was thinking another cool kind of point that we could mention is just the research and testing to make sure that you are touching many people with your design, and have the opportunity to do an Instagram trap. And we utilized an app on iPhones that were mounted in an arc kind of spread, where it was facial recognition led, and it focused on things such as if the user is or the attendee is happy or sad, if they're engaged, by their eye contact, their age, and these things are all great for data later. But what this app did is it gathered all this information for us. It shot up to the cloud, then it shot it back to the phone. It was like a 30-minute buffer or so, but we were able to tweak this experience on the fly. What we realized was there was people in the back that were very engaged, even more engaged than the people in the front. And we had all of our ambassadors answering questions and providing swag near the front. So when we moved them towards the middle or a little further to the outskirts of the area that we were activating in, we got critical mass, and it continued throughout the rest of the time. So just throwing out there that, there are also interesting tools to help us tweak when we're trying to reach many people during an activation or an event as well.
Wow, that's pretty fantastic to hear that. You never think about that kind of way to real time collect data and actually manipulate, or I shouldn't say manipulate, it's a bad word, but to modify the experience as it's ongoing. I really like that idea. Greg, you want to jump in on this question?
I'll piggyback on actually a couple things that both of you guys have said earlier. Right? To Isaac's first comment about educating, I immediately thought of my middle school history teacher, Mr. Higgins, who immersed us in learning about the Civil War as we recreated it in the classroom by throwing paper balls at each other and recreated that within the classroom. Now, whether that would be acceptable today is a whole nother story, but I think there's this whole concept of just immersing yourself into a moment or a period of time to kind of take it in, right? And emotionally process what it is that your surroundings are providing you. There's a lot of psychology that goes into this perception of A, satisfaction, but B, this experiential moment that people can have, and understanding that, a lot of the way that the brain works is the brain isn't built to necessarily process words. You read a book, your brain's creating a picture of the story that you're reading at the end of the day. So your brain's not storing the actual words you read in the book, but the images and the pictures that you've created in your mind by absorbing the words. So any way that we can continue to immerse people. When I think about my days at Disney, so I left Disney right as we were starting to roll out the Magic Bands in Orlando, and talk about scale and trying to create personalized moments for people, even in a large scale environment. I love some of the stuff that Vitari was talking about. I remember when we started to have characters or trees, greeting customers by name because we had the technology that we could pull that from their Magic Band as they were walking by. So you're able to create these micro moments for people, even at a very large scale type of environment. And, at first it was very, it was cumbersome. It was, frustrating trying to figure out how to do that. But, when you really break it down, you don't have to play to everybody. The more you can start creating some of these more micro moments within a much greater experience, it helps build the greater momentum around what it is that you're doing. So I think, for us, it was a lesson learned in don't try to overwhelm yourself with trying to touch every single person, but when you can do that in kind of micro bursts and build upon that in your master experience strategy, you can still win at the end of the day. So it doesn't have to be a large scale process. You don't have to touch everybody, but how do you build upon it as you grow something out?
Thank you. Wow, you guys have done some really great stuff. That's very exciting to hear. Let's shift a little bit and say, talk about this notion of time. And, experience design, and it's been said by lots of people that it's really the design of time, right? It's the time that I will spend on something, or the time that the attention that I will give you. And, we're in a world that's got so much clutter and so much media. And the question is, how do you guys design experiences that will actually gain people's attention and create some place for them to spend their time? So we're going to start with Vaitari this time.
Okay. I'll start with, I think, something that I really enjoy is theater and drama and activations or events, to maintain intrigue. And I see Isaac probably uses this tool a lot with his exhibitions. I think there's a lot of time spent on main spaces where experiences are experienced, and there's light design, there's thousands of hours that go into build outs and making these spaces so fantastic and amazing. But a lot of times these larger spaces don't get their moment. Think about a lot of times when you arrive at events, you're free to wander wherever, through a big space, through corridors. But what about kind of, parsing that out and controlling that flow a little more? Inviting people in for a cocktail hour, again, taking your time, maybe having a countdown on screens, or content or information on screens that get people ready for the experience. Maybe there's a musical buildup that allows for and people to be able to go see the larger space. Curtains can be used to then be pulled back to reveal that moment that larger space has for people to have that jaw-dropping moment where all that time and work and effort that was put into it is actually realized. I think a good use to kind of funnel people in is tunnels. If you narrow a corridor or a space to a tighter point, when you reach that final larger, grander space, it feels way bigger, and it's grander overall. So I think using theater and drama to usher people through to experiences in particular spaces within the larger space during the overall activation or event is a great way to get people's attention. Using the tool of takeovers, whether it be a city or a space or even like a store. Art Basel is a really good example of that. If anyone's ever been, there's the city light poles have branding, the airports have branding, the neighborhoods are all welcoming the event or the festival itself. And, there's a part on South Beach and there's a part on Miami proper. So it is kind of broken up, but that experience still feels the same when you cross the bridge and go back and forth, it's really beautiful to me because there's an energy that is felt, and that energy comes in the form of like color and visuals from the branding of the event or activation. In addition to, there's music, so there's vibration, there's food, which is smells. And when all these things come together, takeovers are really powerful. And for this conversation, I was thinking of there's something that kind of sparked my interest in thinking through headsets as a modern kind of individual takeover experience. Just because, when people are in them, they're audibly, they're completely, into the experience. Visually, 360 degrees, they're in the experience, and you have their mind share and their mind space for that full time. So on a more modern level, just a headset experience is an individual version. And then playing on curiosity at activations is always fun and interesting because you want to put enough out there that people get what it is, but leave enough back that they want to come up and, if it's open to the public, to come up and want to experience. You have the opportunity to convert a new customer right there physically and while you're touching them. But the thing that always makes me happy though at activations is when children bring their grandparents over or they'll bring their parents over. And, a lot of times I do a lot of tech-based or innovation-based things. So as long as the children pull over the adults, that curiosity still gets them in the headset. It still has them jump in the experience. So, even thinking through once they're kind of there, getting people who are maybe standoffish to let their guard down and jump in I think that curiosity is a great point. And then the last thing is just surprise and delight. It's a wonderful tool to utilize. We use it really well in a VR experience with the NHL. where we set up at the Penguins arena. We had a shipping container there. You were able to go in and sit down in a round, put a headset on, and in the experience, you skated up to the Stanley Cup. You were able to reach your hand, you want to put your hand up to touch it. When we asked everybody to remove the headset, we actually had the Stanley Cup put in front of them while they had the headset on, and they didn't realize it. And when their hand was out, they were inches from it and were able to touch it. So, that type of surprise and delight brings tears and memorable moments. But I think these things are all really great ways to gain attention for people and using time.
Oh my gosh. You actually had an opportunity to touch Lord Stanley's Cup. That's something that a lot of guys work really hard to get to, right? Wow. Hey, Greg, you want to jump in on this question?
Yeah, there was a ton of stuff there that I completely agree with. I think kind of shifting down another lane here in, having done this a lot in hospitality and more of the day-to-day types of engagements, experiences that typical customers or guests may have just on a day-to-day. I think understanding what removing friction has always been a huge focus of mine. So how can we create an experience that also helps remove some sort of customer challenge or touch point or alleviate stress or anxiety in the journey? And I think the importance of research up front is really, really important to help understand where that is and where that lies. And I love this example, and I use it all the time. I'm an avid Delta flyer. You can probably see above my desk, I've got my Delta plane collection. I am not paid by Delta to sponsor them, but I'm doing it organically. They did a study, and a friend of mine who I worked with at Disney is now over their customer research team. And they actually put Fitbits on the wrists of their flight attendants and customers. And they did a whole study understanding where heart rates were elevated, where there was increased anxiety, and just, signs that showed there's a pressure point in that customer journey that was mutual amongst customers and the employee base. So they learned that the boarding process is the most stressful engagement that a flyer and a flight attendant has, because the flight attendants aren't paid when that door's open. You got the people who haven't flown before trying to figure out how to get the luggage up into the thing, right? And people just want to get in their seat and be comfortable. So they're using research in order to kind of reverse engineer the boarding process and understand how we can build a much better flight experience, knowing that everyone's heart rate starts getting elevated when it's time to get on the plane. So how do we get fewer people lining up in front of the gates? Because that's the other thing, they start calling numbers off and the whole plane just swarms the gates. So how do you start just relieving some of that consumer stress and anxiety by understanding exactly where in the process that people are having some of those challenging points? So I love that example, because I think it just helps reiterate the importance of take a minute to just do your due diligence and understand where there's a huge opportunity to alleviate an opportunity or some of those challenges by creating something that's much better and much easier for folks to adopt to.
Wow, that's a great example, and I think you're right. I get very stressed out getting on the plane too, because you're like, who am I sitting next to? This whole thing is like a big surprise. So yeah, it's interesting.
There's always a new boarding group too. I swear every time I get on a new plane, there's some other group that's now boarding before me. And it's like, where did this come from?
Right. That's so true.
And I read a study that said that boarding a plane is second only in stress level to a trip to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
I believe it.
Yeah. But yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying, Greg, about removing obstacles, and Vitari about using theatricality. Absolutely. Like both those things, we use those in our work for museums and different cultural attractions all the time. And one thing that we really focus on a lot is motivation. What are people's motivations for coming to a culture institution or coming to a park? And, what we've found is that very few kids wake up in the morning and say, I want to learn how human behavior is contributing to habitat loss for endemic species in the Amazon. That's just not what they're thinking. They're thinking, I want to go to the zoo. And so what are those draws, those things that are inherent to the project itself that they're going to pull it in? It's, a charismatic megafauna, or as some might call it, an elephant. It's the elephant that is the hook that is going to draw somebody to a zoo or a wildlife park. And then once you have them at your facility, that's when they can actually make that emotional connection. And once they start to care about what they're seeing, that's when you have an opportunity to layer in some messaging. And that's when you can start talking about, okay, well, how is human behavior contributing to the habitat loss? You wouldn't want to do anything that would jeopardize this animal's long-term well-being, would you? Well, here's what you can do in your daily life. So those educational messages are coming through because we've made them interpretive. We've made them something that somebody cares about. And the hook wasn't the message. The hook was the experience. So that's just one example using live animals, which are easy to use as a draw.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic. Well, why don't we jump into one more question here, and then I'll give you guys a little time to ask each other questions if you choose, because it's fantastic. You probably don't get to sit down and talk to other folks like this very often, and I'd like you to have that chance. And we're going to start with Greg this time, but experiences. I think we all know this, that they can be magnified and the recall can be better if we engage multiple senses. And I was just wondering if you had any strategies, or how do you employ these senses? And, there's 5 of them, and how do we get to that?
Yeah, when I saw this question, I'm like, I know exactly the story or example I'm going to share here. And I think it's understanding, it's taking a step back. And I think a lot of times we build things, or and I'm going to use an example of a nightclub that we built back at my MGM days at Park MGM. So it was called On the Record. And what's cool about this location is we built a speakeasy within the bar, right? So there's this hidden room that you go into, a speakeasy, into this nightclub. And, it's funny, as we were building it out and we were, preparing for it, you have the lens and the mindset of exactly what it's supposed to be. But if you can remove yourself for a moment as a designer and as a creator and someone who, can just think outside the box, you start to understand where you can leverage pieces within what you've already created to create more micro moments and bring people deeper into what I'd like to say a story, right? How do we incorporate people into the story that we're trying to tell in some way here? It was funny. It was right before we opened. We decided that we had all these shelves of vinyl records on the walls in the speakeasy, and we were like, "Gosh, how cool would it be that if you just grabbed one of those records off the wall and took it up to the bar, that they could mix you a drink that was inspired by that album?" And we're like, "Oh my gosh, this is brilliant! Let's try it." And it wasn't something that was ever advertised. We just organically wanted people kind of engaging with their surroundings. So they started touching the album. Or people would start, shuffling through the albums, and, we'd have the servers and the team members in there start to plant a seed that, do more with the album, right? And then they start taking it up to the bar. Well, now there's, each bartender could create a different drink that's inspired from their own interpretation. So now you're not just getting this really cool thing that's now happening. Now you're letting the team members kind of be a part of that creative process where, there wasn't a recipe for when everyone brings up the Queen album that this is what you make. It was giving creative license to the team members to also be a curator of that experience and an artist at the end of the day. So they could create their own custom drink that, was inspired by the Queen album or whatever it may be. So I think it's just being able to take a step back and understand that there's so many more things that may exist within your environment that you can do some really cool stuff, again, to be a part of that story that creates FOMO. I think going back to something Vitali was talking about, and wanting people to talk about it and miss out. I think the whole goal here is to create FOMO, that something happened somewhere else that you didn't know happened, and you've got to go back to try to experience that. That's what keeps people going back at the end of the day.
Wow, that's great. I like that. I mean, that kind of interaction between guest and customer, those things create incredible moments. And especially if the guest, or if the server has this opportunity to bring themselves to it as well. So now you're really connecting across the whole experiential line. So Isaac, can you jump in on that question about the multiple senses? I know having done some work with you before, I know that you guys consider that.
Oh, definitely. And, Greg and I didn't coordinate this, but I'm going to talk about a bar experience as well. But in a roundabout way. So, we worked on a project in the center of Canada in Winnipeg, and they have an object there that is absolutely stunning. So in 1567, a ship left Deptford, England, to sail to the New World, and that ship launched the Hudson's Bay Company. And so they have a replica of the whole ship sitting out behind the museum, and they built a building around it. And visitors can go onto this ship, but it was just a beautifully crafted replica. But the replica was made in 1967. Beautifully crafted replica, but just sitting in this black box, nothing going on about it. And so what we decided to do was, okay, we need to convey how important this object was to the formation of our country, and it's got this 350-year history. And so what can we do? We don't want to just fill it up with computers and interpretive panels that describe it. So the concept that we came up with was to recreate Deptford, because for one, we're trying to explain, why is this ship sitting in the middle of the prairies in Canada? It's nowhere near the water. And so created this whole port scene where we're using the smell of the pitch, and you're having facades, and there's a pub. And so, well, how are people going to know where they are and what the significance of this ship is? It's all done through audio track. So when you step through the doorway of the pub and you sit down, you hear the rah, 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 and then motion sensors trigger. And it's like, "Oi, matey, we just returned. It's 1567, the new world," and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, you're overhearing the conversations of these guys who have just come back from discovering the new world and coming in. And there's food on the tables, and there unfortunately isn't beer being served, but there are steins, and there's everything that you would find in a 16th century English pub. And then visitors can walk all along the planks, all along the pier experience, and then as it's going through, there's a backdrop. So we've got this huge black wall. What do? Painted a mural that shows this infinite horizon, and then using light and sound, it cycles through day and night. It cycles through different climates, so it starts to rain and crash and thunder. And so you give a little bit of a sense of what it would have been like to be on the ship for 3.5 months, making the crossing from this little place to this new world where who knows what they're going to experience. And then, of course, a really important part of that is, well, why did they come? And so there were pelts, beaver pelts and other animal pelts that visitors could touch. So they're all bundled up on the dock. This is what they brought back from the New World. And then also the indigenous perspective. So there's an oral tradition that's been passed down from generation to generation of when the ship first appeared on the horizon, the local indigenous population didn't know what they were seeing, and they thought it was clouds that were approaching them, and that's what they described it as, the ship of clouds that came towards them. And so we included that whole narrative and interviewed elders who have had the story passed down from generation to generation. And they gave the arrival of this ship from their perspective and what it meant to their community. So we're getting multiple perspectives, all tying it through. And so far, there's not one word printed on a panel anywhere. There's not one computer screen. It's all completely immersive, completely through that auditory experience and using the other senses as well. So that's one example of how we try to pull it all together.
Well, that's quite an example. I think a trip to Winnipeg is in order now. So
absolutely, Winnipeg is always lovely, but maybe wait until the spring.
Yeah, sounds good. Waitara, what do you think of this concept?
Well, what I loved about Isaac's point was it was innovative, but there wasn't necessarily tech. I think that's an important note in distinction there. That's still innovation and experiential. And Greg's point was really cool. I love the idea of allowing other workers to curate and other people that are putting on the experience to add value in their own individual contribution. That's a great approach. Really, really smart. For the 5 senses, you have the usual suspects like and experiential, like smell design, sound design, wind design, all that good stuff. But I'm really excited about haptic feedback tools. There's haptic backpacks, and there's little haptic tools that can be mounted to surfaces such as tables or walls, and it uses vibration. So that combined with like VR, AR, or other platforms allows for really, really great experiences to be had. Another interesting thought, I think, is light design is super important, but within that, there's simply the reduction of light, just reducing it. things tend to feel more magical when it's darker. That's just, it's just kind of how it works for some reason. And then if you add like a haze or a smoke with light design into a space that doesn't have much light, now there's like this 3D kind of interesting take on a space that just you don't feel or experience on a daily basis. But it's quite easy to achieve that, again, by just reducing light that we normally are used to having in experiences. And then the last thing would be a variety of dimensional planes, like 2D and 3D. You could play with volume and space in AR and VR. And there's an experience that is in New York. It's a walk the plank VR experience where you're kind of out on top of skyscrapers, and it really throws people off. So, it's playing with, we mentioned the senses, it's playing with almost all of them all at the same time beyond smell. And there is a wind component in a lot of VR experiences as well. So it's always interesting, the different mediums and modalities that can play with more than one at a time, which is really intriguing to me. And then throwing out one more kind of example, another VR experience where a headset was removed, similar to the Stanley Cup, but we did an abstract art experience where we took over an art gallery, and each room was a different VR experience with really great, phenomenal artists. But the rooms themselves were, interesting because it was an abstract experience. And so there's a lot going on the ceilings and the floors and the walls, different shapes and colors and materials and textures. And even though there was so much going on, what was interesting is when people initially went into the room, they just sat down and didn't pay attention to all that detail. But what we did was we left the kind of that last scene in the VR experience was, again, kind of like the Stanley Cup, was how the room felt. So when the headset was removed, now they were immersed into the story. Now these designs and this intricate kind of, pattern on the floor or wall meant something. So now, I'm taking off the headset, and now you spend 5 minutes to explore the room, and you want pictures and selfies, and you become more bonded and attached to that environment. So I think, playing with those kind of planes are an interesting way to mess with the senses as well and add value to sense-based experiences.
Wow. I'm just blown away by all these experiences. I have to get a list of all the places you guys designed, because I got to go on a big trip. Jason, you have any questions that are coming in from the audience?
No, actually, I have a question. So, Batari, I hope you can explain the haptics a little bit more. I think maybe some of our attendees may not understand what that is, and I'm curious of a little bit more on that. Actually, what that means in what you do.
It's very similar to, it's the same concept as when your phone vibrates. Essentially, it's that same kind of concept. Some controllers, video game controllers, have feedback where it vibrates kind of, and you have the feeling like where you're crashing into something, or maybe if you're in a car, you feel like you're grinding against an edge, so it vibrates. It's that same kind of approach, but just put into different different wearables, essentially, or different ways to wear it. Some have kind of sensors on the chest that mounts to get this feeling, and then on the back as well. So you really feel like you're feeling what's going on in the experience, either in a headset or through AR. And another cool way is mounting it on a table or a surface, suction cup kind of. They mount either on the top or bottom. And imagine, people sitting down in experience, and then all of a sudden, like not being ready for it, the table vibrating or shaking in a moment to add value to the experience. So that's that haptic feedback.
Okay. And I think I read somewhere about haptic suits, correct?
Yes,
like you could
correct.
put on a full suit and be totally immersed in a VR experience with that suit on.
That's right.
Amplifies, I'm sure, the sensations, correct?
That's right.
Exactly. Sorry, I don't know if you can help with this, but I seem to have this ghost haptic thing happening in my pocket when my phone's not there. I feel like it's there. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I've been experiencing that lately.
That's wild, right? Yeah, man. Used to it being there.
I just got a call right now, and they don't even have my phone with me. So I know exactly what you're talking about, Greg.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Jason. So before we jump into I have a couple of specific questions for each one of the panelists, but I wonder if you guys have any questions of each other, or, all three of you work kind of in the field, but differently. And I was just wondering if you had questions for each other.
Well, I'm really curious.
Go ahead, Batari.
I had a question for you guys. It just regarding exhibitions and more like tour-led, virtually led experiences where museums and other places that curate experiences don't have to have as much staff on hand. That trend was obviously, it seemed like it was exploding before COVID. I'm kind of curious as to where do you think that'll go when things get back to normal, or will that continue to be a thing? Or do you think people will want more, because you can go visit every virtual museum right now and they're down, right? At first, everybody went bonkers when COVID kind of shut down everything. And then very quickly, there was a sharp drop off from people experiencing virtually because it is so different. I'm just curious as to where you think things will go when, you know, in a year or so, when we land back on our feet here.
No, it's a great question. And we obviously talk about it a lot. And I think, you know, it's the reason that people go to museums. It's that authentic experience. It's the real thing in front of you. It's one thing to do a virtual tour and see, you know, the Mona Lisa on your screen. It's another thing to actually stand in the room and see it. And so what we strive for in all of our projects, in addition to, as I mentioned earlier, making things relevant to the person, it's making sure that it's authentic. It is the real thing right there, and getting as close and as personal with that real thing as you can. So, you know, we all carry these supercomputers in our pockets. And so we try to get people away from that experience. If I can do it on my phone, why would I bother to come and visit your museum or your science center or whatever it is? And it is because of those real things. Adding on to that, I think the personal experience of engaging with other human beings to have shared experiences. That's one of the things, you know, as Greg mentioned, nobody's in a hurry to figure out how to board a plane again, but they sure want to travel. And they want to travel because they want to be in a real place that's different from where they are now, and they want to do it with other people around them. And so I think these are all going to be huge factors in quickly coming back to where we were pre-COVID, as far as in-person experiences and authentic experiences. And then I had a question for you, Vitari, and Greg, you mentioned wristbands as well, as far as personalization. And one of the things that we discuss and struggle with, I personally struggle with a lot, is the balance between personalization and privacy. And we're seeing now with Apple and Facebook going at each other tooth and nail. I'm Team Apple, by the way. I support having those privacy controls on there, or at least giving people the option to opt in or opt out of privacy. And where do you see that conversation going? How do we personalize but still respect people's privacy?
I'll jump in real quick. That was certainly an issue at Disney. And I don't think a lot of people knew the data that was being collected on them. And you take some of the documentaries that have come out in the last year, that really put a spotlight on this. And I think this is one of our biggest issues too. I was doing some help with the contact tracing app for the state of Nevada and California. And that was certainly one of the biggest issues to get people to adopt even just a COVID-19 contact tracing app, was the fear of data. And again, that came after, you know, the recent documentary on, you know, social and what everyone's collecting. I think transparency is the most important aspect to that. And there's something about it not being attached to your personal device that gives people, I believe, a feeling of more confidence and comfortability. So if it's not on my actual phone, what are you actually going to be able to tap into versus it being a wristband? So it being a separate thing, I feel like we were able to work through more of those challenges because it wasn't a phone versus you know, it being its own element that may be collecting some information.
Yeah, it's a challenge for us as well. I mean, even just basic signups now to collect people's information, there's a million questions and people are super scared to just give their email, or their, you know, it's getting very challenging. I think Isaac had said this earlier, it's, you know, authentic, creating experiences that are authentic enough that people really want to, it's worth it. It's worth giving that to have that experience. And I think it's value. A lot of it boils down to value, and it in the future it will be heavily based on value. You know, otherwise people will just move on and not choose to participate in the experience.
Yeah, one thing about it's gonna up the game, right? It's gonna up the game on all of us to design better and better and better experiences, because some of them are getting so good that, but you can't, you know, you don't want to see the same thing twice, right? So it's going to be a lot of future work, I think, for us to do it right.
If you could add the value, I mean, how can you operationalize it too? I mean, one of the benefits of like the Magic Bands at Disney is we could tell if there was a ride that went out, how long certain people actually stayed in line before that ride went out, and we could proactively service recover those customers first. And those that were waiting longer, we could do more for, because we had the data to say, hey, because you wore this band, we know you were here. And immediately they saw the value in having that, because now we were able to repair, the experience for them in the moment and real time. And that certainly helped having that moment.
Greg, did you push that was that to their mobile device, or was it an app that, like, maybe a coupon?
There was an app. So back when I was there, we're talking 10 plus years ago now. This is super early days before the mobile app was fully integrated with it. So that was, we'd take the data and then analog call people or reach out. Yeah. The app got integrated later, but yeah, then it would they'd be able to deposit fast passes or whatnot into someone's digital wallet within the app.
That's awesome.
Craig, can I ask Vitari one quick question? Because he hit something earlier about TikTok, and I'll tell you, I'm addicted to TikTok, and I'm one of those that probably shouldn't be on the app near as much as I am, but there's something fascinating about what TikTok has done, in my opinion. And that is, you take this, much younger generation who typically has much harder time staying focused and getting, ADD and just all over the place, right? But now they're creating content that's focused. They're forced to create content that's meaningful within a minute, right? You've got a time frame to do that. Seeing the power and just watching some of the movements and some of the things that have happened culturally through, social media and TikTok more specifically. How do you see that playing out a bit more, down the road? Do you see some of that intensity continuing to grow? I think a lot of it's pandemic inspired because everyone's bored. Do you see that same intensity moving forward afterwards?
Yeah, I do. I think it gives a lot of youth a platform to express themselves, to creatively express themselves. Whether we're locked inside or not, I think it's still going to be a platform. Now, as they grow, as that generation grows, obviously they'll probably grow out of it. But it's so trend related as well that it's kind of a part of a fabric of culture now, because it's every popular song has a little dance or something, or every popular kind of look, or whether it be makeup or fashion, there's a moment for it there on TikTok. So I think that's the kind of part that why it will be around, just because of the cultural engagement or the cultural component to it. It really is a fabric of a thread of fabric of life for them.
I think it speaks to the decentralization and democratization of content creation, where you don't need to be associated with a huge brand anymore or with a company. If you have talent, you now have distribution channels to get that out there.
It's changed the view of the influencer, really, in a way, right? It's not just about how many followers you have, but how engaging is your content now.
Totally.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Totally. I love that there's like that creative, people are born with looks, they're born with certain things, certain people economically have more money to show off and, show off their expensive things. But we all have this equal playing field with a camera, and what can you do with it? I love that to that point. It's fantastic.
Sure allows people to engage creativity in a way that they feel comfortable with. And creativity is so important for, I believe, education, as well as just becoming lifelong learners. So that whole kind of engaging their creativity, I think, will pay dividends to those folks in the future.
For sure. It's creative problem solving, right? It can be applied to so many different things. And yeah, there's a friend of mine who was heartbroken when his daughter told him that when she graduated high school, she was going to go to theater school. And he thought she was going to be a lawyer. And I'm like, what do you think a lawyer is? A lawyer is an actor who stands up there. They can think on their feet. They can play to a crowd. They can play to an audience. So she does a degree in theater. She could still go to law school. Don't worry about it, buddy.
Yeah. Fantastic. I remember years and years ago, one of the doctors that we were doing a hospital project, and he told me, he says, the kids that are the gamers today are going to be the surgeons of tomorrow, because it's all about that hand-eye coordination, and we're going to be doing remote laser surgery. And I was like, well, okay, but here it is, right? It's happening.
It's interesting, gaming more than the movie business, right? And everybody, don't play games, there's no future in that. Well, actually now there's a lot of money, and there's millions of jobs and, a ton of different, roles to experience within gaming companies. So it's a whole new world.
Wow. This whole conversation was just kind of unscripted, unplanned, and it's been one of the best parts of this whole thing. So thank you guys for for jumping in there. But I want to be respectful. Jason, I'm sure we've got questions streaming in. Can you want to ask a couple of them? And if we have time, we'll go to the specific questions. If not, we'll kind of let it roll.
Yeah, we have a few come in, and but I have to agree with Craig 100%. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate everything. And I have more confirmation on that because we have an office chat that's ongoing, and my watch has been buzzing, and the haptics have been happening with me like this whole time. So, first question is, there's certain venues out there that small businesses that just been hit harder than others with the pandemic. And this is a question about the Nevada Ballet Theater. And they've been hit hard this pandemic, and, performers aren't able to perform this past year. So when budget is an issue, money's not coming in, how can a nonprofit or a small business take advantage of the new experiential tech solutions for outreach?
I'll just throw a quick anecdote in here. I think if you watch what happened with the evolution of the QR code over the last year, let's talk about the QR code for a second. Here's something that
suddenly became useful.
Tried to find its footprint for a very long time, right? And now all of a sudden it's almost a complete expectation that a QR code is on every table you go into at a restaurant, right? And it's simple, and really Apple and Samsung helped enable the popularity of the QR code by making it simple to be able to pull that up. Versus having a separate app. But I think the simplicity of it is don't overthink it. And, how can you leverage some social media presence in the interim and tie that into something, more meaningful when the time comes right? I think a lot of businesses have been forced into a digital innovation of their own that they weren't ready for right now. And I'm sure Vitaly can dive into this a little bit more from a digital sense, but I would just say don't overthink it and find some really small wins that can certainly grow into something bigger as time goes on.
Yeah,
I completely agree with Greg. I think using social as much as possible, trying to be efficient with your spending now, because it's being really strategic to make sure you're effective. Maybe venturing into AR or some other modalities on social to get engagement in a new way. There's you can link ads now with AR experiences and other experiences, and so maybe spending some of that digital spend or that promotional spend on new mediums and social could be a good way to go at it. But I do agree, keep it very simple. Don't overthink it right now, and really focus on. I really feel like this isn't going to last forever. So how can you take this time and reimagine and reinvent what your experience could be? Through that consumer journey, take this time to just add value and make that experience better. And then promotionally, you can throw out there, hey, when we get back to where we are, we have all these new value adds for you to come and experience. So really utilizing the time appropriately right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for both your answers. Greg, I agree 100%. The QR codes is wow. I love the menu option for that now. And Vitaly, keeping it simple, I agree with you 100%. And I think one thing about experiences or creating experience for people are attracted to authentic moments. And I don't think you need to spend a lot of money to be authentic and get yourself out there in social media. So thank you for your answers. So I'm going to keep going because we have a couple more coming in. So amazing panel. The question or comment is for all three of you, and I know we're kind of tight on time, so let's try to get through these if we can. Given all of your experience, just curious if each of you is able to separate yourselves from your craft, and when you experience something you didn't design, are you still able to see things and experience them like you're seeing them for the first time?
I'll go first on this one. Absolutely. I'm constantly in awe of what people do. And in our industry, as you can imagine, in the museum design world, it's a pretty tight community. It's all friendly competitors. And when I see something that somebody's done that blew my mind, I let them know. And, I usually have to go through a new exhibit 3 times. And the first time I go through as just a visitor, a wide-eyed visitor, and just trying to take it all in as much as I can. The second time I go through, I try to figure out how they organized it. How is the content organized? How is the experience organized? And the third time I go through, it's with a fine tooth comb, and I'm picking at things and how did they actually build it? Because yeah, we're constantly learning, right? When you're in a creative field, you can't stop. You can't stop.
Yeah, it's whenever I travel for anything for work experiences, it's always looking up what experiences are in that city or in that place. You know, can I get a ticket to it? Can I get in? How can I figure that out? And it is challenging because you're trying to enjoy it and just be I don't know, not be so focused and just kind of get lost in the experience. But, you know, there's when you, to Isaac's point, when you see something really cool and you're like, how did they do that? You got to go examine it and, you know, and prod it and poke it. And so that does, but to be honest though, that because we were so passionate about it, I mean, for me personally, it adds to the experience. It's like, that was really cool. And I can leave with the general memorable experience. And then I can also leave with these pluses that I can, you know, maybe implement myself. So it's always like a dual reason to go to these experiences.
For time's sake, I'll just say yes. I'll piggyback on all of that. I think yes, absolutely go in. And I'll give one example. There's a experience in New York, Sleep No More. It's a new version of entertainment theater, and it's, you know, you kind of go in and it's self-guided. You create your own story as you go through. And my first time, I think I've gone 15, 20 times now, because it's A, different every time you go in, but B, first time you're trying to take it all in, and then you start trying to unpack it all. But yeah, I think I definitely fan out when there's something super cool out there and trying to get a hold of it.
Great. And I think even us as architects, we learn from each other. And I think there's an aspect of that also. So, thank you guys. Next question, and I'm going to reword this a little bit. And the question for all of us, given the opportunity, do you think we could all work together on a project? If so, how would you see the possible synergy?
Well, I'm in this business because I like collaborating with people. I just love working with people with, you know, amazing other skill sets that add value to whatever it is I can think or do. And, you know, we can Voltron, you know, together and create things. I think anything with the skill sets we have, we can create experiences, we can create buildings, you know, this team here it's limitless, really. I think it's really about aligning on a common goal. And then, you know, figuring out who's, you know, pulling the particular skill sets needed for it. But I love backing into solving problems in that way with other groups of really talented people with different disciplines.
Yeah.
I love groupthink, especially in the creative space. The diversity of thought and perspective is so cool, especially when you can just kind of use that as you continue to move forward. I think more the better here.
Anything to add, Craig or Isaac?
Yeah, I'm going to add something. First of all, I hope that was a client that was actually thinking of this, and we absolutely can. I think what I think is the beauty of this is that we are all coming at it from some maybe different place, but we all can understand and develop empathy for what we're trying to create at the end of the day, and together we could be phenomenal. There's no question in my mind, and I think I'm going to make that one of my 2021 goals, is to find something for all of us to do.
Awesome. Good. I'm in.
Me too.
Great.
All right. Have one more, and then I think it's a short answer question, particularly for Isaac. Maybe we'll do that one first. Isaac, what was the ship experience you referenced? What is it called again?
It's at the Manitoba Museum in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, just north of North Dakota. And the ship is called the Nonsuch, Nonsuch. And so that's the name of the gallery. Yeah, Great. Google it. It's awesome. And read the Wikipedia page. It's amazing.
Thank you. And so I think this will be our last question for today. With the increase in immersive art experiences over the last 10 years, what do you think about Area 15 in Las Vegas, Burning Man, Electro Daisy Carnival, some of the local experiences that we offer here in our environment? And how are these experiences influencing your work?
I'll start being in Vegas here. Area 15 is a really great experiential guess it hosts so many different experiences. It's pretty interesting. I mean, everything from immersion type rooms to axe throwing to visual light design experiences. I mean, it's really cool. And there's always things kind of revolving. You can watch football games on the weekend in the immersion room. There's an outdoor space. So we personally, it's very inspiring, seeing another really great experiential offering in our backyard. And then because there's so many different exhibits that rotate through, we can go quite consistently every few weeks and go see something new. We love that has come to Vegas, because you would think there'd be more. It seems right for it. So we're just really happy that they've landed in Vegas and are kind of pushing the envelope. And I think it'll help start a trend around the country now that, it's a pretty big one. Area 15 is pretty big. So hopefully it'll set some more trends around the country to take some of the dilapidated malls and things and use that space in a really cool new way.
Great. Any other answers for that question?
Yeah. I'll say the first time I went to Burning Man was the year 2000, and it really blew my mind. And I see that as a test bed for all the crazy, dangerous stuff that we wished we could do in our work. But you try to extract, well, what is the core experience that they're getting at? And try to figure out, well, how can we give people that same sense of awe that we're getting in this almost sacred place from this experience. And I think another one that is worth mentioning is the City Museum in St. Louis. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like an outdoor playground made out of abandoned architectural objects, old airplane wings, and it's rusted metal. And I'm not making it sound as cool as it actually is, but look it up. It's called the City Museum in St. Louis. And it's just free-form creativity. It's just people trying things and testing things. And, well, that didn't work. Well, cut it down and build it up again. And having that prototyping, it's something that, I don't think we get the opportunity to do enough in our work, but it's so important to what we do. You got to try it. You got to mock it up. You got to play with it. You got to break it. And then you got to build it again.
Yeah, that experience of doing that is part of an overall experience, right? The doing, the trying, experimenting. So, thank you. Oh. Any last thoughts before we close?
I'll just throw one tiny thing out there that
Okay.
ties into what both these guys said. I just think, at the end of the day, people are looking to leave their everyday, and they're looking to leave their the stresses of what they're dealing with right now. And, if for just a split second, they can leave their current reality and go into someone else's mindset or another place to just escape. I think that's what makes the most successful moments for people, is they're able to just escape life for a second and refuel and recharge, which is what it's all about.
Totally agree.
Fantastic. Guys, this was something else, man. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much for these wonderful stories. We could have gone on for hours, and I may be calling you to try to twist your arms to do a follow-up on this one, because we couldn't even.
It's got to be in person next time, Craig. It's got to be in person next time.
I'm all over that. we let's make that happen. This was just so engaging, and I think we talk a little bit about creating these experiences and creating attention and time, and this was well worth every single second we were able to spend with you guys. So thank you so much. And thank you to our audience, who I noticed stayed with us the whole time. They weren't dropping off because it was so good. So thank you guys. And we'll be doing another one coming up soon. Jason?
Sure. I'm going to try to get this for everyone. So we're in the early planning stages for our next fireside chat. Be on the lookout from a notice from us, but plan for sometime in March. And we love the topic of visitor experience, and we're going to continue with that. This time, next one, we're going to put a little different twist and talk about how healthy environments add to a better experience. So that's going to be the topic next time. But I agree 100% with Craig. Great panel tonight. We'd love to have you guys back again. So take care, everyone. We're going to sign off now, and thank you for joining us.